Да? Ну, сказали, начинать. Коллеги, супер.
Colleagues, it's very interesting. But anyway, I just want to say hello to everybody. Second, I like very much the way RIA Novosti organizes these conferences, and in fact, RIA Novosti has this luxurious room, and I would like to suggest that we meet more often. We have very good equipment here. We have a very comfortable place, an auditorium, and I would like to congratulate RIA Novosti. We may not have RIA Novosti guys here, but anyway, I just want to say that it would be a very good idea to meet here more often, not just for bankers and financial people. Second, we have a very challenging, on the one hand, task and a very easy one at the same time. We were asked before we came here, we were asked to talk about new financial instruments, to let people know more about them. The difficult part is the fact that we virtually have no people to talk about them. I don't know why Valera would like to know about Forex, because he knows more about Forex than I do. And I don't know, frankly, what I can tell Sergei Kirstanov about this. But I doubt that he will learn anything new from our conversation. And for Denis might make beautiful pictures and then write how 7 of us try to discuss this, but in fact that wouldn't change anything. There's too few of us to be able, after this conference, in this beautiful room, to move the market in any direction. We might have some representative from a large multi-billion-dollar fund that might invest in our economy. If such a person is present here, I will step back and we will put in this panel that guy, if he is present here, if he or she is present here, and he will talk about how beautiful it is to work on the stock exchanges. We don't have Mr. Gates here. Practically, we don't have anybody here. Okay, so then it makes everything very simple. Let's just talk about the new instruments. Let's do it that way. Apart from the people that I know, the people that know much more than I do, we have some random people here. People that for some reason heard the word hedging. And Konstantin also wants to know about hedging. Okay, sounds good. There should be some 2 or 3 persons that just want to know more about hedging. Don't be shy. We will talk to you about hedging and new financial instruments. If you have any questions, even if they are not relevant to hedging, those questions will be very welcome. We will do anything that we can to explain that to you, to talk about the financial markets, to talk about the Russian financial market, to talk about a specific company. If it has at least anything to do with the financial market, we will try to do anything we can to answer our questions. I will try to do it, my colleagues in the panel will try to do it, and Sergei Kirstanov will also try to do his best. So we'll do it this way. Now I will pass the floor to the first speaker, and you, as he speaks, you will think about your questions, and we'll see if you have any questions at all. Let's begin with the first speaker. So, Denis Domin, he's from St. Petersburg. He's a St. Petersburg guy. He came from St. Petersburg, and we'll talk about the St. Petersburg market of financial instruments. I was wondering, Denis, what instruments are there in St. Petersburg that are not there in Moscow? Because otherwise, Muscovites. Unfortunately, I will not be able to say anything just now. If you speak louder, nothing will change. Oh, there's a mic coming along. All right, people are... All right, we have a... All right, let's have a stand-up. No. Sit down. I'm the guy who stands up. You sit down. Well, as a person who does not relate to the trade infrastructure, into the trade, I'm an analyst, a general analyst. I would not talk about the new St. Petersburg instruments. We have a person here in this room that would be able to do it much better than I can. I will talk in general about the general topic of our meeting, just to lift the lid on our future discussions. Let me begin with the fact that I believe that the deficit of financial instruments per se, traded and non-traded, is the greatest obstacle to the development of hedging market and currency instruments and other instruments. Speaking about hedging per se, by the way, we're trying to discuss hedging, and by the way, in St. Petersburg we're trying to promote these services. We're trying to promote them to the masses, and we're trying to promote to companies that might be interested in currency hedging, and we see that we have more progress with raw materials derivatives. I think that the biggest obstacle to the development is the lack of demand for such instruments. And I'm not talking about potential demand, because I understand that a country that has been trading quite actively with the Eurozone, with the dollar zone and other zones, the potential volume of the market for hedging services is great. And I'm talking about the real demand. Today we've heard before lunch that the Russian companies are not ready to pay for the benefits that are clear for them. And hedging is not sometimes the spending on hedging is not always obvious for CFOs, for CEOs that we deal with. And when we start providing the service, we sometimes end up in a situation in which the client does not understand why he pays money for that. And based on the parity of interest rates, we know that the dollar is a little bit more costly today than tomorrow. So it takes us a lot of time and effort why they would need hedging and related services. I believe that in fact currency hedging lacks in demand, and it's more relevant to importers and exporters. So it is sometimes hard to explain to people why they would need to use hedging, and sometimes they can do it themselves. They can use derivatives to hedge their risks. So I would like us to try and develop our discussion in that plane, in that vein. I would like us to not to get too much focused on the markets of derivatives that you can earn a lot of money in. But I would like us to talk about directly hedging, risk management, and the use of hedging in risk management as a way to deal with risks and manage them. I guess this is very relevant to the Russian market. I guess it would be a good idea for us to talk about when and under which circumstances the great potential of hedging operations through currency instruments can be unleashed. So that's just by way of a start. Dennis, that's all great. That's awesome. But you haven't mentioned any single instrument that would really encourage people to go to work with you. Second, you said that you didn't mention when that potential would be unleashed. Can you project when that potential will be unleashed, and what is needed for that? As for the obviousness of things, well, sometimes it's not obvious. If it were obvious, we would have more people in this room. So we might need to have a stronger panel. So we need to make things more obvious. But anyway, when do you think that potential would be unleashed, in your opinion? Well, ironically, the demand for hedging grows during the times of economic instability. Well, instability, so it turns out that instability is a good thing for us. Do you mean that? Well, in a certain way, yes. In order to come to a company and offer a hedging service to them, then that company would even listen to you, even if that company didn't lose on currency rates and exchange rates. So there should be some bad thing in order to motivate that company to actually listen to us and be interested in hedging. Otherwise, it might seem to them like a waste of money. Dennis, if you're right, if instability is upon us and it is a good thing for hedging, then why do we not have anyone in this room? Almost. This room is almost empty. Well, I don't think we should directly link the emptiness of this room with the lack of demand for hedging. Well, as for inflation and our dealings with the dollar zone and the eurozone, hedging is a pretty expensive proposition. So now I think that this is a limiting factor for the players that would otherwise resort to hedging. This might sound like a controversial thing, but anyway, can you just name at least one instrument that I should go to St. Petersburg? Well, St. Petersburg, yes, we were instructed to talk about this. Well, I guess there would be guys from the St. Petersburg Stock Exchange that will talk about the specific instruments. Colleagues, any questions to our panelists from the audience? Do you have any new questions related to what I talked about, but not related to hedging directly? No. Okay. Vadim Vinogradov, you know everything about Forex. Vadim, you have the same question to answer. But anyway, we may talk into the small hours about Forex, but let's do it now. Okay. Well, we hear you very well. Can you use the microphone, please? Well, I don't know if there is any need for the self-presentation of the Forex market, but please talk about the instruments. Instruments. It is just the time to use hedging because the situation is unstable. How can you hedge through Forex? Well, this is an interesting question. No doubt, the questions that we're discussing here in this panel are quite promising, but controversial. But as for risk management and hedging, no doubt, on the market that as a company that I represent, for a company that I represent, there is a great demand. There's a great demand from the Forex companies and clients. Any decent Forex company is interested in ensuring to VIP clients very transparent and clear conditions in order to attract those clients to the market. So the demand is there, and we all very well understand that it's a very high risk market, and we are not trying to conceal it. So the demand is there. But The next problem that I would like to point out in this area is, this problem has to do with something that is not regulated. Any market begins with, and we understand it very well, any market begins with something chaotic, and then it begins to self-regulate or regulate itself, and then there is the government oversight. It might become tighter, it might relax, but the area that I represent is in the realm of self-regulation. On the question that we're discussing here on the need for tighter regulation or no need for tighter regulation, in general, and with respect to my area, I can say that it's not correct to talk about the need for tighter regulation. I think there needs to be a more systemic approach to regulation. There needs to be more consistency, because it's not a secret that tightening control, no doubt, does not contribute to lesser risks, does not lessen risks, and does not contribute to arbitrage, does not lower risks. And if we overdo with regulation, then we increase risks. And if the business moves to tighter regulation, and the business might move from tighter regulation to no regulation at all. So we might end up seeing that. So we see that the crisis really revealed the problems in regulation, in the area of regulation, in the work of regulators, and in the risk management. And the first reaction is the tightening of regulation. I think that's not the right way to go. Everything should be wise. So if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Well, what questions can we answer you? You didn't mention any single instrument that we could hedge our risks with. Well, if you're interested, well, that is a technical. We're lay people, and we're supposed to talk about instruments. Well, if you have any technical questions, and if any of the colleagues present here are interested in this particular issue, I would be happy to talk about it. But we don't insist. Well, too bad we don't have Mr. Punkin here. If Mr. Punkin were here, then your words, Vadim, that it's cruel to tighten regulation, we would support your words. But in fact, it would be a good thing for him to hear that from you, and you would receive a big round of applause. You would be congratulated, and so on and so forth. But, well, our country is developing exactly the way it does, exactly the way it is. And regulation is going to be delegated to the central bank. And you see that things are very harsh in the central bank. So do you support the idea of delegating regulation to the central bank? Do you support that? Well, as we understand, there are some pluses and minuses. There are pros and cons. The idea of creating a regulator would implement the idea of a cross-factor regulation or oversight. So maybe there will be some effect. So in that regard, the logic is clear. As for your statement about the fact that central bank is a harsh regulator, this is up for discussion again. This is up for debate. But this is largely dependent on how a legal system develops. So we can also provide examples from foreign experience. We know that Dodd-Frank, the American bill, as a result of some measures on the foreign market, 50% of the American companies ended up leaving the American jurisdiction and moving to the British jurisdiction. So they left America because it was they were better off in the British jurisdiction. So the crisis of self-regulation exposed the risk management related problems, exposed the fact that the regulators were not ready. That's all clear, and the first reaction, the knee-jerk reaction, cannot be a different reaction than making things tougher. So since we're talking about this excellent subject of regulation as regards hedging, maybe some of our other panelists would like to talk about this. I suggest that we take turns talking, and when it's my turn, I will talk about all of those things. Okay, let's wait for his turn. So, thanks very much, Vadim. Colleagues, since we are taking turns in this direction, those colleagues still have things to say. You don't. If you guys have anything to add, please don't be shy, interrupt me and add. Moscow Stock Exchange. Good afternoon. I represent the temporary market of Moscow Exchange, and I would like to talk about three things, in fact. First, currently, the temporary market of the Moscow Exchange, we clearly see, very clearly see, an increased demand for real sector companies for instruments that allow them to hedge risks, and I'm pretty positive about it. And I'm talking about, above all, I'm talking about instruments related to currency, and I would not agree, with all due respect, with Dennis. As for currency futures, for example, remembering about your desire to talk about instruments, remember it. Currently, we see very active trades in options and futures, in ruble versus the dollar, ruble versus the euro, and dollar versus the euro. These are very popular instruments among hedgers, and one of St. Petersburg companies conducted an IPO for a large Russian oil company, and they hedged their risks using futures. The second thing that I would like to talk about, and by the way, I've already talked about it, there's another problem. Price risks. The companies hedge price risks less actively, and this has to do with the fact that we haven't been able to offer interesting instruments so that exporters and importers of our products, such as oil and wheat, so that they can hedge their price risks using those instruments. And also I would like to say that now the Moscow Stock Exchange has been quite actively promoting financial instruments, and we believe that we see the biggest prospects in that area to help companies reduce their risks. And secondly, speaking about currency hedging, I believe that we can single out two markets, and I would not mix Forex with it. Hedging, and I'm not talking about speculation, risk hedging or hedging risks is possible in two currency sectors. The first is the stock exchange sector, in which you can hedge your risk using futures and options, and the second market is the OTC market, over-the-counter market, in which banks, including major Russian banks, offer services that provide services that allow large companies, large exporting and importing companies, to fix the rates in the long term. So here we have a bit of a competition process over-the-counter services providers, they are in greater demand with large companies. Large companies, when it comes to a bank, they don't need to fund their bank. They don't need to provide any collaterals as might be needed with futures. And that is why, and here I would agree with Dennis, in crises or during crises, there might be a turning of tables. Everything might change. The OTC derivatives market was big before 2008, and after the fall of 2008, everybody tried to find a safe haven in the central counter agent. And this is where MISEX comes into play. And so I believe that the existence of this infrastructure that we currently have allows us to avoid default risks. Let me remind you that default on your responsibility liabilities is something that we didn't experience. I'm talking about overdue payments, and you're also talking about the newest temporary market. Well, Forex is something that has been around since 1998. Okay, colleagues. Well, the one thing that I like is the fact that Dennis talked about the fact that economic instability is a good thing. And you say that everybody works on the OTC market. Okay, many people, not everybody, but many people work on that market. And you say, okay, here we are. This is a crisis that led many people to the stock exchange. So it seems that you guys for the financial market, the instability crisis is exactly an area of opportunity for you. That is something that gives you opportunities. I wait for the mic. Switch on the microphone. I might use some wrong definitions. Hedging is not about it. Well, it's hard to accuse me of the fact that I'm an adept of, but I'm in favor of political correctness. I'm not an adept of Forex, but anyway, I'm in favor of political. Don't apologize. I have two constructive questions in light of what you said. My first question: is anything being done, or are you thinking of doing at least anything to improve the liquidity of long-term contracts? Because the majority of liquidity is in the short-term contracts. Are you going to expand the horizon of hedging mechanisms? And my second question is about the longer term. When we saw the emergence of the first euro-dollar contract, and that really generated a lot of enthusiasm, and then there was a long pause. So it's quite logical to wait for a stock exchange contract, not only for euro, but for other, not for euro-dollar contracts, but for other currency pairs. Ideally, we should have 10 of them, but at least for the main currencies such as the pound, the yen, the dollar, the euro, the ruble, and so on. So, are you actually planning on doing anything? Well, in answer to your first question, indeed, we are working towards improving the liquidity of long-term contracts, and we have already made some initial steps towards that. I can say that in 2015, and I would like to say right away that the ruble-dollar futures contract is one of the most liquid instruments. Anyway, all the currency operations are tied to the dollar. But I would like to illustrate that the open positions for the ruble-dollar futures is about $1 trillion, and many of them are all the way to 2015. So we have $200 million that are up for it. So I can say that the ruble and dollar is a contract that can be quoted, where you can get quoted large sums for a very long term. As for the second part of your question, I can say that indeed we going to launch new cross courses. We thought of doing that earlier, but currently we had to postpone it due to the launch of the new trading system that's going to be launched in November this year. And shortly after the launch of the new trading system, it will be possible to quite actively implement the new instruments and services, including the new futures contract for the new cross courses. To support Arseny on liquidity, Roman Suji suggested a new system of encouraging the initiative of market participants, as part of which the winner company would be able to get 3.5 million rubles a month for first place. So, and there will be other places as well. So that the way that he suggested for increasing liquidity, that's as regards the first question. Okay, you can get $100 million pretty easily on our temporary market. But this is a competition. Did you attend the last committee meeting? That's why no, I didn't attend. There was that was a stellar hour, and everybody was really surprised that he was ready to provide $100 million. And Volodya Twardovsky said that that was a bit of a gamble, and we didn't have any people from the forex market, so everybody agreed. All right, we have covered two questions. The second question is easier. Shouldn't you combine the euro and the dollar? So my question to you is this. You're not in London, you're not in Japan, and I heard you work in an investment company which is a member of the Committee on the Temporary Market. So why shouldn't you come to the committee and suggest, please introduce this and this contract? I'm sure that Arseny would support it. With other committee members, we would support that proposal. Agreed? Excellent. Okay, another question. Well, I was on a business trip in Central Asia, and there was a very good tradition. Central tradition, are you going to talk about old tradition? No, I will only mention one tradition in light of our conversation. When a donkey is being harnessed, and there's a small rod on which you attach a carrot. So the donkey, when it sees the carrot, it moves faster. So in accordance with Central Asian traditions, the donkey is supposed to finally receive the carrot. Thank you for your statement. Thank you for your intervention. Carrots are exactly what we have been talking about, but this carrot of $1 million, no, we didn't feel that we would finally eat that carrot of $1 million. Dmitry Solokolov, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Arseny, my question to you is this. Don't you think that the stock exchange forgot about the stocks and is talking about the derivatives market? We don't see any movement of liquidity. There is $29 billion of private equity funds. How is the stock exchange is going to stimulate the long-term market of long-term derivatives? And D plus N, how are you going to really get the long-term derivatives market moving? I guess what you have been doing is not enough. What exactly is the stock market going to suggest? What competitive advantages are you going to offer? Dmitry, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with the fact that the derivatives market that I represent here largely depends on the dynamics in the securities market. The Russian securities market, and everything you said about the flight of issuers, whether they come or go, this is a continuous process. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert in stock market issues, but let me tell you this: we analyzed the situation in the stock market, and we see that the momentum is going down in all stock markets. So, perhaps speaking about some serious problems, global problems, is not worth it. As for T plus N, the management of the MySex believes that this is an important project that allows us to attract not only domestic investors but also foreign investors. That is probably one of the reasons why our issuers leave the Russian market, because the Western funds use a different procedure for trading stocks. So I believe that the introduction of a globally accepted practice for the trade of shares would contribute to a large American, European funds actually going into the Russian market. Well, are we perhaps late with the T plus 2? It seems to me that we are late. Well, I don't think so. Dmitry, you can torture poor Arseny, but he's a stock exchange guy. If you ask him, well, if you talk to him about the derivatives market, he would only say good things about it because he is from it. The best market in the stock exchange is the currencies market. It has come a long way and it's developing rapidly. Why? Because there's been some relaxation of regulations. Because normal people, ordinary people can go to that market. And once it occurred, the market got moving. Of course, the issuers leave the Russian market because they feel bored here. It's not interesting for them here. And at the last session of the Stock Exchange Council, we talked about it. We said, listen, this is a challenge, and you do not respond to that challenge. You don't meet that challenge. And something has to be done. And people were a little bit surprised, but generally they agreed that there is a certain amount of truth in the fact that now we have to take listing more seriously. Currently, we have a draft project for a listing reform, draft project for a listing reform, and I guess you read that draft. And as part of increasing the stock market, now we are discussing we're discussing stock funds and pension money, and if we can get it through this cumbersome and slow bureaucratic system, then we can expect to see some significant progress. Well, as for the private equity, I guess there should be some regulations created. We can also coordinate. We need to coordinate our actions and the structure with the Service for Financial Market of the Russian Federation. So there's a lot of work to do. And T+2, T plus N and T plus 2 is that is a huge amount of work, because our legislation is not ready to work in the T+2 system. So it is not yet clear how it will look. And the schedule for the introduction of T+2, I put it on my website, and it's on the website of the stock exchange. So if you guys are interested, you can go there and check it out. Thank you very much. You protected your organization that is being criticized, and rightly so. And sometimes I sympathize with you, because you get a lot of criticism. You come under some heavy criticism. So some people who say that you're gonna fail, you're gonna butcher the IPO, I want to say to those guys, so if you don't believe that you will succeed, then you will never succeed. You have to believe at least in something. All right, anyway, or somebody at least has to believe in something. Colleagues, apart from our beautiful Moscow stock exchange, for you there is a very strange, maybe it might be strange to you, but there's another stock exchange. It trades very strange commodities, not stocks, not cement, not currencies, not derivatives, not risks. It sells or trades energy. Sergey is a long-term representative and the CEO of that stock exchange. Colleagues, since our housing and utility services are going to rise, and since the fact that all the related prices of electricity are bound to grow, maybe Sergey will say some other things to me, but I'm completely sure that every year things will get only more expensive, including the energy. So Sergey, maybe you're going to hedge, or can you suggest some hedging instruments to us? What do you trade? Do you hear me well? Excellent. Thank you. Well, let me scare you a little bit, just to make it interesting. Last week we had a conference here in this room about the Russian energy sector, and we had speakers from different consumers, major consumers, and we talked about the fact that the GDP in Russia was going down, which is a fact, and if the market in the communal services and the housing utility services continue to develop the way it is, we would not have any Russian industry, because everybody would go to China or elsewhere. And as an example, one of the speakers was a chief engineer of the joint machine building plant, and he said that our normal profit is 5 to 7%. That's what we get by producing real products such as wheels and so on. And out of those 5-7%, up to 5% are the tariffs that we pay in utilities and transportation costs and heating costs. And if this growth continues, that would simply render us profitless. If we look at what's taking place in the aluminium industry, then some aluminum producing plants in the European part of Russia would have to be shut down. Now, if we look at the price of energy in Russia, then that price has already exceeded the price in all of our neighboring countries. including the countries to which we sell gas and in which electricity is produced using our gas, including Belarus and Kazakhstan. And the Baltic countries stopped selling electricity produced from our gas. So you see that this situation is dire. And currently, this is a very serious problem, by the way. Let me give you another example. I'm talking about the prices, and I'm also trying to put this into context of hedging. In the Chelyabinsk region, there's the company called Crystal that grows artificial crystals, and the costs, the total cost, 40% of the costs are energy costs, and the margin is really small. And the price hikes that we saw in winter and in summer, they introduce a huge amount of risk into the whole business of that company. And they say that we can't accept those risks. We have to hedge ourselves against those risks. So, okay, if you hedge for the winter period, and then before the election, there's a mandate from the government that the price of energy shouldn't grow in December. So it turns out that you buy energy much more expensive. Okay, I have the same amount of profit, 15 to 20%, but I lost potential greater profit. So I guess the biggest problem is the fact that there is a lot of instability and the high price of energy. And maybe if the prices stay low, then we wouldn't need any hedging. And currently, in accordance with the government instruction, there's a reform aimed at creating a new model towards 2013 and 2014. The energy market will be completely governed by market principles. What does it mean? It means that there will be a lot of risk. If you do not regulate the sector, then it's a bad thing. And if you over-regulate it, then it's again a bad thing. Let me give you another example. The decision to liberalize the market of power generation, and it's a kind of a tax. The government says, okay, we're going to liberalize the prices. And 1 month later, there was a meeting presided by Prime Minister Putin, during which he said that I'm going to take it out of my stomach and give it to the people. Okay, the people basically paid a lot of money for the energy, whereas the market price was much lower, and that market disappeared. So it is a problem. The problem is with the price. So now I can identify two problems that we have to address. The price and in the energy sector, in the electricity sector. I'm not talking about the oil sector. I'm talking only about the electricity sector. I believe that the end user and consumer has to participate in the price forming process. For example, when we go to a gas station, to a gas pump, you participate in the price setting because you buy something. And I guess the same opportunity exists in the electricity sector. Mr. Yesin, I think, already talked about it during the previous session. What does it mean? It means that there will need to be a certain amount of help from the stock exchange community, from the brokers, in order to establish fair price setting in this market. We know that we have seen the formation of a few holding companies that control the generation, the transport, and the consumption of energy. So it seems as though the situation is really complicated. So we have to approach this very wisely. Both the business, both the government, and the government has to really intervene and do things wisely. And we have to guard against any collusion between the producer and other market players. The second thing that I would like to talk about is the fact that apart from the electricity market, there are other enabling markets such as gas, fuel markets, the market of fuels for the energy generating facilities such as oil and coal. If we do not do anything, if we do things right, and by the way, maybe some of you use Merrill Lynch. There is a section for the stocks market, and another section. The other section is for commodities. They trade on all markets and ensure the formation, the structure products for their clients, and they get profits for them. The first place in terms of volumes is the oil, and the second is electricity. Third, gas, then coal, CO2, and weather futures, switch contracts. So this really creates a structured product for the consumer. So the consumer does not go to the stock market. He or she goes to a bank, and there is a certain division, and he might say, I want to be serviced by your bank, and I just want to get the energy at the cheapest possible price, and the bank will take care of the things. Nobody goes to risk management. They just come to me, to a representative of E.ON, for example, and say, all right, we want to get hedging for 3 years ahead. And they get services like that. So, but we have to wait for the market to mature. We are not ready to accept other risk. Did I take a lot of time? I'm asking the moderator. Now, let me talk about regulation. I believe that the good of our stock markets and commodities market is the fact that we haven't had any regulation. There was the 1992 framework law, and under that law we can build other legal constructions. The good thing is I guess the state regulators can only intervene if there is some illegal activity, if there is stealing or other bad things. Of course, the state has to intervene in those cases. And every people back then in 1995, people really set the rules for themselves. And I guess my idea is for this market to be as open and transparent. And we have a lot of laws. The legal framework that exists now is quite sufficient. Why? Some people say we need long-term futures contracts. We are not interested in short-term futures contracts. Companies like Enel and E.ON that trade their stocks in stock exchanges, they say that we need to get that we have to have a fixed level of profit. But this is only possible with hedging. If you don't do any hedging, then you can't guarantee a fixed profit within a certain corridor. In Western markets, they use forward contracts. So they don't provide collaterals in cash. Normally they use futures and other types of instruments. So the idea that I'm trying to get across to you is the fact that in Moscow, at the Moscow exchange, this is doesn't seem possible because the market is not completely ready at this point. It is not mature yet. We need help. We need help from the financial authorities, such as the Federal Service for Financial Markets. As for brokers, yes, the stock market allows them to earn money the way they do now, and they lose money because of the lost momentum. What brokers am I talking about? I'm talking about companies like communications companies that provide access to the market and get their cut. Western brokers are different from the brokers that we have now. His or her job is to create a structured project for the client. They find counteragents, they manage portfolios and archives, and our counteragents have this possibility if they really notice the commodities market and the fuels market. This is something that can be done. We can create medium-term contracts and use them at stock exchanges. We can buy gas, we can buy other products, not only by large consumers, but also medium-sized and small consumers. That is a way to get liquidity. If we allow commodities to trade, for example, allow small entities to buy diesel on the St. Petersburg exchange, they wouldn't have to make rounds of different plans and shop for the best price. They can simply come to the stock exchange and say, I want to get it at the best price. What can you suggest? And we can also create a pool of liquidity. We should rule out the situation in which each stock exchange pulls the blanket on itself and tries to grab everything. There should be a pool of liquidity, and that might apply to the oil sector, so that you don't have to go from different ministries to ministries and really try to get the best possible conditions. Of course, that's not the best. That's not the best option. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sergey. Any questions from the audience about stock exchanges and trades and so on? Well, this is a very peculiar type of trade. What Sergey said about the influence of the state, of the government. As long as the government stays out, we make progress. When they turn their attention to us, we see a lot of bad, well, not always bad, but most of the time bad things taking place that do not allow the market to continue developing as fast as it should. Well, if we talk about the derivatives market and the commodities market, when the state did not intervene, then sometimes we saw crashes and collapses. But there's another problem as well, which is a pretty serious problem for us. The government believes that the stock market price is a low price, which is completely wrong. And it's very hard to change the mentality of the government, and the government does not even allow the possibility, does not allow the price for big prices to exist. And when the government intervenes, everything collapses, everything disintegrates. And I remember an example of the MySex. When the MySex price on cement was big, Lushkov said that's exactly why real estate is so expensive in Moscow. When the price of cement went down, was at a record low. It turned out that the price of housing and property in Moscow stayed the same. Lushkov is out of his office, so it's hard to criticize him for that. Sergey, I would like to congratulate you. I don't know if you heard that. Mr. Rybnikov requested the concept for the development of national commodities market, and hopefully we will see that coming out in December. And when it's out, he said that we would start discussing it. I invite you to join in, to get involved, and maybe write a chapter or a paper about the energy commodities market. When we do that, when we approach this bottom up, without any government mandates, top-down mandates, we can do this. And this is a good thing because we can act freely. When our colleagues discussed this question, we got a stack of documents this thick. And London, that was London preparing law on regulators. I don't know if you were present, Sergey, I don't know if you were present back then. That was a package of documents related to approaches to creating regulators in other countries. So that was a lot of work, and we kind of shortcutted it here in Russia. Any questions? Okay, go ahead, please. Good afternoon. On liquidity, there were opinions that on the currencies market you can easily open a position, a hedge position worth $100 million, and on the market, obviously on the market of electricity or oil, we can try to do the same. My question is this: it's possible to enter this market, but how about leaving that market? Because speaking about all those positions that can be speculation positions or hedging positions, when it comes to supplies, I think everybody present here experienced this. Before supplies, you can see miracles on the market, and with big volumes before the supplies, the hedger is not interested in getting a supply from that, getting some supply of oil products, for example, from that stock exchange. I cannot imagine liquidity in oil in all stocks across Russia, the same level of liquidity across Russia. Fine, let's say I buy that. So you have to supply things first, and before supplying I have to get out of that contract, get my cut or get my part, pay my bills, and buy it on the market. But even on the commodities market, there are miracles on the day of shipment. So I would like to understand, to know whether stock exchanges think about addressing these problems. Because if a client can get out, because in fact he's a hedger, he or she would have a problem. And how do a stock exchange plan on ensuring stock supplies, for example, of oil products? Will they build terminals? Well, I understand your question. Do you guys understand the question, Sergey? Shall I address this question to you, or Arseny? Well, Well, we had oil. Well, we don't have any miracles taking place. In fact, there were supplies futures, and on RTS in 2007 it was launched, and in 2009 it was closed. There was a certain level of liquidity, and in fact these contracts create a certain level of discomfort, not just for the real market participants, but also for the broker companies, banks. And banks cannot trade supplies futures contracts. Yes, for a physical person to get one barrel of oil is probably not a good proposition. So when we discussed the contract in 2007, there was a futures contract for the supplies of fuel or sugar, and they didn't come a long way. They were not developed because people did not trade them. The liquidity of small oil traders was not enough, and the speculators, represented by investment companies and physical persons, just stayed out of this. So life is exactly the way it is. So when we talk about oil, we have that problem. At the St. Petersburg, okay, going forward, 2 weeks ago at the St. Petersburg International Forum, International Stock Exchange, they opened 7 futures contracts for oil. I think it was 7. Okay, yes, they are cool. 7 oil supplies contract. But the problem for oil is something we know about. But what about wheat? We have a lot of small farmers. No matter how much I tell them, they say to me, we don't understand futures. They have to go through supplies. They have to look at all those. Miracles that occur on the supplies day, on shipment day. So I guess the idea is that they just don't want to understand the idea of futures. Okay, and I sometimes quit. I say, okay, let's do it your way. And some futures, some stock exchanges just say, okay, I can supply the commodity, and it's not the problem of the stock exchange. You're right, Anatoly, that miracles do occur, and it's not a question of futures. The question is that the commodities market does not exist. There are snippets of this and snippets of that. There are some stock exchanges that trade a specific kind of stock, but we don't have a continuous and a consistent system. I believe that we ourselves create the miracles. I have worked for 10 years in the RTS, and I remember how shipments were made on the contracts, and you just write one thing and other things happens in practice. So sometimes people just did things that were not particularly good. Well, if I see large differences and I decide that I buy 100 contracts from the entire market, it is clear that I will not be able to close those contracts. So it turns out that it is me who creates those miracles, quote unquote. And the traders are not allowed to close their position before supplies. He is a pure hedger. He sells at a price that has been set by the risk management, and then he achieves supplies, and then he closes the price. Because if he begins to speculate, he's going to lead the company I don't know where. so you can fantasize. Other things are pure hedge, are about pure hedge. That's how things are in Western markets. We will do it the better way. Colleagues, now I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Twardowski. Vladimir is an exceptional person that he is the CEO or president of IT Invest, and there will be an instrument that can be used by those willing to hedge their losses of working in the derivatives market. Thank you very much. I will probably disappoint you. I think it seems to me, why are there so few of us? This is an extremely important topic that we're discussing, such as instruments and hedging. This is an extremely interesting topic. Why do we have so few people here? Where are the people? Okay, how many press representatives do we have here? All right, 7 people. How many representatives of professional licensed organizations do we have here? And how many of you are not Forex representatives but at the same time trade on Forex? All right, let's not talk about Forex. Are there any representatives of the central bank, Ministry of Finance, or central bank? Can you identify yourself? Do you represent the Ministry of Ministry of Finance? Well, it's quite encouraging that at least the Ministry of Finance came here. Well, since we have so many people here, then and by the way, I did want to say a thing or two about Forex. I do believe that this is gambling, but I will not talk about it. I will just talk about the topic that was brought up by Arseny and Sergey, namely the fact that the entire financial market with hedging and financial instruments is just a superstructure over the economy, and the way the economy does is exactly the way that superstructure will do. There is a funds market, there is the debt market, there is the currency market, there is the money market, there is the derivatives market. That is again another derivative, so to speak, from the entire financial market. So speaking about the hedging, we have to put that in context of the derivatives market, because you can't hedge anything in the financial market without using derivatives. Is not possible. It is only possible through derivatives, and you can only hedge using those instruments, primarily options. And the hedging market has been created for the economy and in response to demand. Of course, it is underdeveloped at this point, and there is a lot of room for improvement. And the derivatives market does not reflect the size of our economy, does not match the size of our economy. But this fact is very surprising. People see that there is a great potential in the development of the derivatives market, and the hedge market, but it's been stagnating or even degrading. People do not understand why people leave collective investments, why people prefer not to, or prefer to put their money and deposit their money into real estate or bank deposits, not into stocks or shares or derivatives. There is a whole range of different reasons, and we will not probably be able to list them all. I guess the excessive regulation that has been grown exponentially proportionately to the number of officials involved in it. Of course, the officials, they have to justify their existence by doing something. So of course they put a great amount of pressure on our market. For example, I was very surprised, not surprised, but I was saddened by the fact that we see the emergence of a lot of regulators in our country. I've seen a lot of materials and I still don't understand why they're being created. Maybe I don't understand it because I'm quite far from this process, and maybe that is the reason why I don't understand. But this misunderstanding, the lack of understanding on my part, also then understanding the fact that our officials have invariably screwed things up recently. No matter what reform they try to implement, they screw them up. So, well, I am very suspicious of the officials. Indeed, the defense reform. We have this Rosoboronservice scandal. The Interior Ministry industry, we know where it went. Just recently, it was quite recently, I had a conversation with the head of one of a department inside the Interior Department. Another such, he said to me, the Ministry of the Interior is toast if we see another reform like that. Because we're losing people, we're losing human resources. Because the people that come to serve in the Interior Ministry, they're just young girls, 20 years of age, that don't know anything about life, that are forced to write figures, statistics, and collect statistics that have not been has not been collected. Another example, the educational reform. There was an education system under the Soviet Union, and we lost it. Where is it? Okay, Sergei said this. I'm gonna scare you. You did not warn us that you were gonna scare us. So Sergei was more honest with us. Again, I got sidetracked a little bit. As for the instruments, I wanted to say that our financial market mirrors the state of our economy. So the kind of economy you have is exactly the kind of the financial market you have. Now I would like to offer my vision of what I would like to see coming out of the financial market. It is clear that the commodity prices, including electricity prices, currency prices, are volatile, and they're heavily volatile, which has to do with this, with some cycles that exist in the global economy and other things. And the large companies, major companies that Sergei talked about, that create business plans, 3, 5, 15 years ahead, they want to know very much how the price fluctuations of the things that they use in their business, how will those things change over time? So it is extremely important for them to know what the dollar exchange rate will be in 2-3 months, and the same applies to gas and natural gas. All right, I tank up, I fill up my car with gas every day, and I know that there are other gas stations, and I can go to other places, and the price will be a few cents more or less. This is the wholesale market, and this wholesale market depends on the fuel suppliers, the oil producing plants or oil cracking plants, petrochemical companies. But at the same time, there is the stock market that have their prices for diesel and for gas, for petrol, and there's a gap between the prices that we see there and the prices that we see at gas stations. So I would like all of us to be able to buy futures on the stock exchange that you can put on some an account or an electronic card with a chip, but that can be any kind of banking card or electronic card. So I want us all to be able to use that card and fill my tank with gas at a price that reflects the futures price. So I just want the end user to be able to control and set the price, to have more of a say in the price setting. And I guess the idea that I'm trying to get across to you is the fact that the stock market prices are quite fair. They can't be high, they can't be low, they're just fair. And we have to find a way around the middleman. We have to exclude the middleman from the process, because it's the middleman that increases the price. The same applies to electricity prices. Now I pay a normal flat tariff. But most Energoizbyt suggests that I use a double tariff, day-night. But beyond that, nobody offers anything. They don't offer that I fix the price, and that would be really interesting to a large number of people. So in theory, we can introduce a system in which you can buy futures or price futures, and then they can buy electricity, for example, at a fixed price. In theory, that is possible, but is it interesting to the middleman? Of course, the middleman is not interested in this. And by the way, watermelon producers are not interested in this. So the middleman is not interested, but the watermelon producers might really be interested in this. And the same applies to wheat producers. Anatoly is completely right that this misunderstanding among farmers of futures is one of the major problems that holds back the development of the hedging market and so on. I think this has to be a supplies business and settlements business for the financial structures that can really earn money using their forecasts. Well, I like everything you said. I wrote, the dream of Twardowski is an innovation kind of dream. I think what you said makes sense. You said two things. You can hedge your fuel price, your gas price, but the second idea you offered was a more progressive one. You can buy electricity, you can buy energy futures 100 years and ahead, and then you at a fixed price, and then you just you can add it as part of a will. When you die, your children will be able to use it. All right, if there is a demand, then there should be some supply. So Mr. Twardowski, there is this Mr. Twardowski who can buy electricity for the rest of his life and even leave it to his children, some part of it. So the demand is there. We have already agreed about the second thing. You can fulfill your dream, and there can be a large amount of sales on the energy stock exchange. Right, I would like to finish my intervention. Dmitry, you would like to ask a question? Yes, you want to contribute a question? Yeah, I would like to say a few things about the mega regulator, and I would like to say where it all comes from. During the Financial Market Council meeting, Mr. Punkin said that the average amount of money that a worker of this service gets is 21,000 rubles, and that said it all. The Federal Service of the Financial Markets. In 2010, the government instructed that 20% of state employees and public sector employees should be laid off, and this instruction is being fulfilled. And the question is, what do we attach this Federal Service of Financial Market to, and how do we merge it? What do we merge it with? So the instruction came from the Ministry of Finance, and they also discussed it with the Council for Financial Markets. But I am afraid that this self-regulation might just disappear. I think that in order to finance this service, the way, for example, it is done in the United States, we can get rid of the redundant things. And then there was another order, a government mandate to stimulate agencies that are involved in counterterrorism, and that was unprecedented. So they just want to stimulate the work of bodies involved in counterterrorism. But I would like to say that the problem exists, and Mr. Punkin just recently said that the law is imperfect and it has to be relaxed, and we have lost our way, so to speak, in those regulations. And the Federal Service of Financial Market is kind of has nobody to control. When I came there, my pay was 5,800 rubles. When did you leave it? I left it. My pay was 41,000 rubles. So that was an 8-fold pay raise. Can I ask a question of Mr. Twardowski on regulation? So honestly, in dealer actions and for brokers, did you see any law that really worsened their actions? No, I can't say that. I believe that there is a lot of reporting that people have to do, that nobody reads that reporting, but in fact that takes up a lot of resources. We are a large company, we're quite a large company on the derivatives market and quite a small company on the spot market. But every day I have a person that spends an entire day on drafting a report, a monthly report, and he does this every day for deals of our non-residents. And it's a large document. Nobody abolished it. We have to file it every month, and we spend one month worth of work. And the number of those reports is growing but does not lower the costs. And another example, the Federal Source of Financial Report for Financial Markets abolished some reports. Okay, can I say something on manipulating inside? I control this on the RTS stock exchange, and we provided in that information to the Federal Source of Financial Markets, and we did that the way Western stock exchanges do. There's the control department, there's the monitoring department that monitor those deals. They conduct investigations, and it is enough to have just one representative of the state. It is enough to increase their salary to make sure that if you suspect something, then you don't need to have 20 people. So you have to spend more time on stock exchanges. They have the money, they have resources, they have the capability to implement that control. And then if you need, you can do that with regulators. Of course, you have to work with the stock exchanges. Colleagues, let's talk about it. I just want us to stay on track, and we have another person, Andrei from St. Petersburg. He represents the stock exchange, the Nikolaev stock exchange in St. Petersburg. There are a lot of stock exchanges in St. Petersburg. We have this commodities exchange and other types. So Andrew, can you say anything interesting to the audience? Because we pretty much understand that well. Well, my colleagues decided to talk about Forex, but let me just for a change talk about it a little bit. And not only because Forex retail market is something that the St. Petersburg Stock Exchange is interested in. But I remind you that that exchange, stock exchange, together with other Forex market participant, has been developing the FX Plus project, has been taking it forward. But also because the Forex market and its regulation has is not being talked about by only lazy persons. Looking back, we have seen at least 3 high-profile events attended by high officials from different ministries, from different quarters, who said that the retail market of Forex should be regulated by the government. And they provided different modalities for this. They suggested that it should be regulated similarly to how securities market should be regulated. They also suggested more democratic forms, and all market participants all agree that this market should be regulated in one way or the other. The market participants created a self-regulating organization, and I see some representatives from it. So, what do we receive? What do we get? The industry is ready for being regulated. I guess the most conscientious ones are ready for that. And we're ready. The state seems to be willing to do that and seems to have the understanding of how this should be done. So I guess we need to figure out how the Forex retail market should be regulated, what licensing requirements should be in place. And nobody argues with the fact that providing services to clients on the Russian territory should only be done by Russian companies that have been incorporated in accordance with the Russian law. Many things have already been said many times about it. There should be some norms for managing the capital of those companies. And the initiative group from self-regulating organizations, as far as I know, has developed a document and then sent it to the State Duma so that it is considered there, and maybe based on that the State Duma can create some regulatory framework for Forex. I think that was a very sound and positive initiative, and hopefully the government will support it, and for that matter by the market. Speaking about the St. Petersburg stock exchange, the FX Plus project that has been implemented since 2008 in fact amounts to an attempt to standardize and regulate the sector of the retail forex market, because only Russian-based licensed companies can provide services for helping clients to enter the forex market. And by the way, another important thing, in the Russian laws, forex deals are not defined. They are not provided with legal protection, and there is no taxation. There isn't anything. So if there is some law, if that law is created, then of course it should regulate things such as legal protection and taxation issues and so on. As part of our FX Plus project, we try to address this gap the following way. We want those deals to have the status of short-term futures contract, which might be very positive for the clients of Forex. So this would amount to legal and protection in court. If, for example, there's a case of misconduct, then the client can have its rights defended in court in all of those deals, because the operations are licensed. We provide a reporting about clients and the company, and in fact this reporting is a twofold reporting, and that reporting is filed by the participant and also by the stock exchange about all participants, and this is quarterly. This is done quarterly. So, and by the way, getting back to the issue of hedging, colleagues for some other reason said that forex instruments shouldn't be looked in the context of hedging currency risks. I wouldn't agree with that proposition. Some of the companies that we dealt with as part of the FX project, we organized an event at our stock exchange about the service that forex companies can offer to companies, some hedging services. And by the way, that conference was not geared towards large companies such as Gazprom or Rosneft, because they have already solved that problem. They know where to hedge their currency risks. They use all the instruments that are out there. And that event was geared towards small and medium-sized businesses who are most vulnerable to currency risks. And we realized with colleagues and with the people from the real sector of the economy, we had long discussions. At first people came and didn't have any idea about what Forex is about and what hedging is about, but after that event they left understanding that the instruments offered by Forex can be used for hedging currency risks that small and medium-sized businesses might have, and even physical persons, like individuals. For example, if you take a loan in foreign currency and then you have to repay it in rubles, then there's a certain amount of currency risks, and you can hedge those risks even if you are an individual. Well, that's about it. I guess I can answer questions if there are any. First, with respect to regulation, I can say a few things about the tender that was organized by the Federal Service for Financial Market, and SFR really won that. The Federal Service for Financial Market really has material on this. As part of this tender, we will see the creation of the concept for the legal regulation of those activities. And another point related to the requirements that Andrew talked about just recently. You can take a look at the standards that are available on the website, the SRO, and in fact there are mechanisms that are already in place, and of course we will develop them. We will try to move on. I just want to say once again that everybody is interested in a civilized forex market, and I believe that this will not only benefit the financial cluster but the entire financial market, because definitely this is the first stage for the people new to the financial market who want to try them at this, and that might stimulate their further involvement. We have different programs. That describe the number of participants in that. I believe that this is a very good initial contribution that our sector can show or can make to the development of the financial sector. Well, the thing that I like about Forex is the fact that this is a very active. These are very active and professional people. Whether there are two persons or one person, they talk about the financial market in professional terms. We have 7 people here, and formally we have only one representative of the forex market. But if even everybody starts to protect the foreign forex market, even Mr. Histanov. But in fact, we ended up in a situation in which Forex is the flagship of the future development of the Russian financial market, and half of the room applauds because probably half the people are from Forex. Yeah, sounds good. I like this idea as well. I protected because of political correctness considerations, which is in fact different from the content. As for the content, the reporting that you provide does not solve any problems. The fact that the client will get information about the margin call, that doesn't make things easier for him or her. In order to make Forex make more legitimate, we have to solve 3 problems, which are known to professionals, especially to those who were directly or indirectly involved in the forex market. This is the backdated, these include backdated deals, and I know that does not apply big participants, but this also applies to small ones, which is normal practice. This is the shift of quoted prices that is possible, and the stock market should struggle with this. And thirdly, what is called connection to server lost, and that is very bad for small forex market participants. So I guess we don't want to put a lot of pressure on the forex companies, but we need to protect the small market participants. We need to really protect the interests of small companies. So when you criticize that forex is gambling, of course there's a certain amount of gambling in it, indeed. But if you look at it, if you put it in perspective, then marginal derivatives are pretty much the same. They're about the same, about gambling. So the question is how to make forex legitimate and correct, and it's up to the people to choose how much risk they want to run. Crosstalk. Well, I guess there is a lot of work to be done. The forex market plays much of a role, but it turns out that more than 10 years ago I headed a broker company in Rostov-on-Don, and then I was also held a position in the Forex Club company. So I know very well the situation there, and I also played on the forex market, and I'm very proud of the fact that I did win a certain amount of money on the forex market. So the typical scenario when people hear about forex, there is a lot of advertising going on. Many people have very negative experiences with them. But those people who have negative experience with the forex market, they do not lose their interest in speculative operations. So people get disillusioned about the forex market, and then they move to a more legitimate market, such as the stock market. Well, you force me to protect the forex market as well, because there are a lot of people who get disillusioned about the derivatives market as well, because people might lose their money, go bankrupt, try to play on that market. And we have heard a lot of publications about the dangers inherent in playing on the market. Colleagues, it's 4 o'clock now. As part of the time that was allocated is over. So if you have any questions, colleagues, from the audience, from the people that are present in this room, then colleagues will answer those questions. Okay, we have questions. Right, you're in. I have just a question, and I have a small comment about the relative nature of our world. When this panel was open, we had 69 people in this room, and I really counted all of them. And at the same time, at the banking panel, there were many more people, and people say, wow, what a great organization. So in the big room we have this session with a small number of people and 7 speakers. So we have people from different markets, and journalists. Just a year ago, when I asked a question in this same room to the previous head of the CRFIN, I said, who has to regulate this sector? How does it have to be regulated? Okay, and 1 year from now, we are talking about the creation of a new regulator. So my question to Sergey, is there a need for a mega regulator that regulates the forex market? Vladimir, how many people are there in the banking panel, in the banking room? I guess so. There are about 50 people. So we have the parity in place. But there's only one difference. Well, I'm not happy with the people, and I scold people, and those people in the other room, they are happy about everything. That is the difference. You can read what's the rating of the banking sector and non-banking sectors. Non-banking sector placed 8th, and banking sector placed 58th. All right, there are a lot of people trading on the banking sector and on the stock market, but I guess there are fewer people on the stock market, playing on the stock market. Yes, I would agree that there are more people on the banking sector, but in fact, that's not what I talked about. I guess what I talked about is the fact that the banking sector was created through market mechanisms. People are very creative, they are very well regulated. That's why they place 4th or 5th. And those people who were regulated from day one, they are at the 58th place, and they haven't made any progress. Vladimir, you had the question. Please answer. Dmitry, you asked a very provocative question. You know very well my attitude to Forex, and we have representative from Forex company to whom I have said many times, and I don't see any reason why I should say it again. If I say those things again, then I will probably be labeled as someone who is not politically correct. But let me just say this. Everybody knows that narcotics are bad. Everybody knows that the government tries to fight narcotics and drugs. But do any of you know, how many of you know that there are digital drugs? Seems to me that nobody knows about it. There are files that have certain information that you receive audioly or visually, and that information acts like a drug, and the person behaves as if they are drugged. You don't know anything about that, and you can think that I haven't said anything to you. There is no demand for those digital drugs. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this just to illustrate the fact that there is no demand for Forex market services. And even if there is, it is exactly the amount of demand that there is for digital drugs. Because it's something that has been created out of nowhere. So, there are many people who lose their money on that market. And people are gamblers. People just start losing money. They start losing their money. Do you remember when the state tried to regulate casinos and play machines? There were employees of those places, those organizations like casinos. They really protested the attempts to close down, to shut down those organizations. And I think that the Forex market that once regulation, what's more regulation, it is in fact a kind of gambling. It has no economic purpose, has no economic sense apart from losing money and getting some emotional jolts. Well, I believe that there will be people who will argue with me, but that's up to debate. And all right, how do you regulate this? You just prohibit it, and that's it. How do you regulate it? You just prohibit it. Dmitry, that's a very excellent, it is a nice topic for the next discussion. Narcotics in the non-banking sector. Can you imagine how many people we would have here if the topic read this? Well, you see, if narcotics were not prohibited, then the volumes would be much more. The volumes would be much more than we have now. All right, let's talk about it at the next conference. I guess your examples are irrelevant. We are not drug addicts. We're dealers. Okay, we're drug dealers. Okay, we're large drug dealers. Do you want to answer? No, I just want to clear up the record. Sergey identified a number of problems, such as backdated contracts or deals. Just say to him, scum, and that's it. He will understand. And the shift of quotes, and then lost connection problems. Or no connection problems. That is the classic way. And also, Forex often is criticized for the leverage 1 to 100. The ratio 1 to 100. But that said, no Forex company forces the clients to trade with the leverage 1 to 100. You're right. Well, every time I see narcotics and I say, I'm gonna give it to you, and the other person says, no, get off me, get out of here. So you shouldn't have started talking about margins and leverage. We have the same thing. Nobody forces you to do anything. There's an anecdote about a person who stutters, who says, give me something. Give me 1 to 40. Don't even stutter about it. Hopefully it means anything in English, but that's the joke. That's just an anecdotal situation. So everything you talk about, in fact, this is a war between different worlds. So if Sergey is wrong, then just say to him, you're wrong, and don't say anything beyond that. It is difficult to talk with him about it because he has been through it himself. He has been through the no connection problem. He has experienced it personally, and you can also provide some positive experience, and positive experiences also exist. So, colleagues, what do you say? You have been asked to stay here until 4 o'clock only. Vadim, I'll just try to very briefly add a few words. I guess it is irrelevant to compare Forex with drug dealing, with selling drugs. I guess it is a vulgar way of talking about. it is irrelevant to compare Forex to drugs. And secondly, the colleagues were right. Some people are workaholics, and doesn't mean that we're all workaholics or addicts. And according to statistics and research, you cannot force people to buy narcotics if they don't want to. And let me also tell you a joke about well, so you think that Forex is a heavy drug. Okay, what are we talking about? Do you remember the anecdote about bacon? Do you have drugs? Of course I do. How? Well, you don't have anything. Well, I have bacon and I'm addicted to it. It's like a narcotic to me. Okay. There's a few things that I would like to say, but I will keep myself from doing it. But Anatoly and Dmitry, I would like to be honest, not to be Weasley. We're not investors here. We do not transport oil. We do not produce coal. We work on financial markets. We all play with money. So the things that we do all amount to playing with money. So Forex is something that is an activity where you give money and then you get something in exchange. So at least I get something in exchange. And the derivatives market and the market of all those derivative securities is a different thing. We don't get anything in exchange, and we can go broke, go bankrupt. And there is Forex, and there are unbelievable leverages. And just recently, and on the RBK site, I saw an ad that said, we offer 1 to 400 leverage. And they use this fancy word, leverage. 1 to 40, 1 to 400. At the RBK website, that was an ad, that was a banner, and I think that was from the company called iForex. But that's not what I want to say. I want to say that I agree with Dmitry that regulation is needed just to guard us against crazy things like leverage 1 to 100. Where do those things come from? They come from interbanking practices where they do all sorts of Weasley things that are just aimed at poorly educated people that only listen to advertising, that believe ads that you want to get a lot of money easily. So this is about greed, and that is all not true when we say that when we're not honest if we say that the Forex market is innocuous, that it is harmless. In fact, it should be regulated. Colleagues, we've almost run out of time, and I want to spare your nerves, not only the nerves of my colleagues. My colleagues tried to say everything they knew about the instruments that are traded on their platforms and exchanges, and a big thank you to you guys. I want to thank everybody who is present in this room for your patience, for your wisdom, for your ability to listen to us, and for your politeness, for the fact that you listen through our crosstalk. I'd like to thank the representatives of the Forex market that protected their corporate and very interesting market. You've done a great job, guys, and I regret the fact that there are so few of us here present here. This market that is called the non-banking financial market, no matter how much it is ahead of the banking market, it is still not so much in demand with our people, with our population, with our businesses, and that is regrettable. This is something that we have to work on. It means that we have to double down. We have to really communicate the importance and the relevance of our market to the people. I guess we haven't done a great job of it. And I'm sure that we will try to make our market more interested. We will try to make the Forex market more equitable, more honest. We will try to make the stock exchange market better regulated, better relevant to our people. And I'm sure that we will be doing just that. I would like to thank RIA Novosti and the excellent organizers that have invited us for this opportunity that was provided for us, for a meeting. I guess all the people that are present here in the panel are excellent people, but you are equally excellent. Those of you who are present in the room. And I want to congratulate you for this, and hopefully see you soon. So, colleagues, that's about it.